My name is Jaffer Chandy. I'm the business head for Europe in Torrey Harris Integration Solutions. I'm very excited to be here today. I'm going to be a moderator for the session, and I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Mark Thomas and Karthik TS. Now, as you probably might have seen as part of the messaging, this is part 2 of our 3-part webinar series on cloud. And in today's discussion, we will look at some of the views on migration to the cloud. What are some of the key considerations that you may need to keep in mind? The different possible solutions that are available today, and while you are implementing that, what are some of the risks that you may come across and how others are mitigating them? But before we start, let's meet our panel. Mark, would you like to go first and give a quick introduction about yourself?
Thanks, Jaffe. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning to everyone. I'm Mark Thomas. I'm Head of Architecture, Strategy and Transformation at Torrey Harris. I've over 30 years now of experience in the IT industry, professional experience, and a few more years of that of amateur experience from very early days of my career. My focus for the last number of years has been on the telecommunications industry, looking at transformations, cloud journeys, and I'm really passionate about helping organizations to realize the benefits of transformation and including into that the transformation to the world of cloud. So I'm excited to be here today to answer some questions posed by Jaffe. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Over to you now, Karthik, if you could do the same, please.
Thanks, Jaffe. Hello, everyone. This is Karthik here. I head the Center of Excellence at Torrey Harris. I have 23 years of industry experience, and I've played various roles, right from being a developer to an architect and all the roles in between. And in my current role, I lead a team of product engineers. So I head the products engineering function. So we have products in the API management and digital marketplace. I also have a team of engineers building solution accelerators to support a services business. And I advise and provide the solutions from an architecture standpoint for all our integration solutions. And I head a team of solution architects spanning across different technical areas, including cloud. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Karthik. Thanks both for the introductions. So let's start with the fundamental question. And Mark, I'm going to come to you for this. Why should organizations consider moving to the cloud as part of their strategy?
Thanks for the question. And I think there's several reasons why cloud is the way to move forward for most organizations these days. And first of all, I'd like to touch on procuring hardware. I don't know if anybody's tried to actually procure hardware since the COVID times, but it's getting very, very difficult. It's a long time frame to procure hardware. And that means you can't react to changing market conditions if you have an increase in customers. If you want to buy service to cope with that increase then and provide the service your customers expect, it's very difficult to get that hardware without a long wait. And running a data center itself is hard work. And if any of you on the call today are running a data center or have been involved in the past in running a data center, it's a big undertaking. The physical building, the electrical supply, air conditioning, all of those elements take a lot of work to keep up and running. And if you have your own data center, the ability to scale based on the fact that you have a physical infrastructure and a long lead time for hardware, your ability to scale out an organization is increasingly difficult without expanding the data center and waiting a lead time. So that scalability and flexibility is one of the key drivers, I think, from the cloud providers to give you that ability to trial things, to expand. You don't want to be in a position where you launch a product, it's really successful, but you can't sell it because you can't provide the services from your IT solutions that your customers are wanting. Another area to look at is disaster recovery. Again, if you have disaster recovery in the traditional sense, you have to have 2 data centers. So that's 2 physical footprints, 2 lots of electricity, and all of the other elements that go with that. Within the cloud, you have that logistical capability of having data centers all around the world. So you can utilize data centers within the UK, the European Union, and the USA, and you could give yourself that amazing ability to recover from disasters should an unfortunate incident strike your company. So on that number of sort of possibilities of why the cloud should be a good move forward, I'll hand over now maybe to Karthik to give a response from his side.
Thank you, Mark. In addition to what Mark mentioned, one of the key areas is innovation, and how cloud accelerates innovation is any organization that needs to innovate and experiment with new business models. It's very important to rapidly deploy changes, test the offering in the market, get the customer feedback, and iterate rapidly, right? And cloud exactly allows you to do that. Because you could use things like serverless, for example, that does not involve too much time to set up. So your whole infrastructure is abstracted, and the cloud provides a buffet of different building blocks that you can easily compose and pick and choose that best fits for your need, and you can quickly iterate your business model. The second point is agility. So it's very important when you innovate and when you try out new models, or even when you try to scale a professional application. It's important to start small and scale as you acquire new customers, and cloud exactly helps to do that. So you can ramp up and ramp down the resources by configuring rules, and it makes it much more easier to do that depending on how the demand goes. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you both. Very pertinent points. I would also at this point like to share that in addition to the points that you both described, I've also known a customer who's used moving to cloud as one of the means to meet their sustainability goals. As Mark, you mentioned, cloud data centers employ the latest and energy efficient technologies that reduce carbon footprint, and having a multi-tenant cloud model optimizes server workload, so less servers, less energy consumption. So yeah, interesting points. So Karthik, my next question is for you. What would you say are the most common approaches or types of migration you see when we talk about moving applications to cloud?
So there are basically three types. One of the very basic way of looking at it is lift and shift, right? Like I've seen customers just taking their monolithic application, spawning up a virtual machine, deploying it, dumping it, and boom, you go. Your application is ready. That's the easiest way to kind of migrate. Not necessarily the most efficient way, but if you want to quickly get rid of your old hardware, you want to quickly move things that's working, you don't want to change anything, lift and shift is the best way to go, right? So refactoring is the second approach. So refactoring is slightly better than lift and shift, considering the fact that you use some of the services in the cloud where you just connect your existing applications to the cloud services and decommission part of those capabilities and dependencies, so that at least you use some of the services that cloud provides out of the box, so that you don't have to kind of manage it yourself. The last part is re-architecting, which is the most efficient way of using cloud in terms of the migration. It's completely reimagining and re-architecting the application by fully utilizing the building blocks that the cloud service offers, so that you make the best use of the abstraction and the benefits that each of the block provides. And that is the holy grail of cloud migration. That requires some time, but it's really worth it. So that way you will reap the full benefits in terms of scalability, in terms of abstraction, in terms of the speed of access, and most importantly, it gives you that level of control and that level of activities that you used to do with your administrative team. That capabilities are provided for free when you use these building blocks out of the box through re-architecture.
Thanks for that, Karthik. So now that we talked about different types of migration, Mark, I'm going to come to you to maybe tell us a little bit about what you think is the target architecture that one could consider for migration.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I think to build on what Karthik was saying, I think one of the areas you need to consider when you are moving to the cloud is what type of organization you are now and what type of capabilities you need from the cloud. Because Karthik has talked us through the sort of lift and shift, the re-architect and refactoring. But when you actually go into that model, it's what sort of data protection, what model do you want to take in terms of the move to the cloud? So in that area, you've got sort of three real possibilities. First of all, is the public cloud. So in that, you are taking advantage of Amazon, Google, Microsoft. You are creating servers, you're creating storage, VPNs, VPCs, all of that capability in the cloud. And you're using that as part of an open cloud. So a server you create or a capability you create in the cloud could be shared on a server rack with other companies. This segregation and separation between the servers you create and other customers, but there are some considerations depending on your data and you are constraints from maybe regulations and government rules, then you need to make sure there's more separation between your servers and your data than other companies. And if you're in that area, then you need to move into a private cloud. And that is where you talk to, again, a lot of the providers, and they will segment. You will buy a rack, you will rent a set of servers from the cloud provider, and that will give you the real segmentation of your data, your capability, the firewalls to keep your area of the cloud separated from the other providers or the other companies that are using that same cloud provider as yourself. So that's two areas of where you can actually look to utilize the cloud. A third area, and we see a lot of companies doing this when they're on the cloud journey. And this is where they can use the public cloud or private cloud concepts that I just mentioned. But the overall concept is hybrid, because at the moment you may have your own data center that you want to move away from. You want to move to the cloud, but you know you can't do that in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, or a couple of months even. It can be a long journey, which may take you a couple of years to complete. So you'll move into a hybrid cloud model. So you will have some of your solutions left in your legacy data center, and some of your solutions will be up in one of the cloud providers. And that also caters for some other demands that regulators or specific rules that apply to you may require. There may be a specific need where there's certain data, certain capability that you have to keep on site in your own data center. But the rest of the capability, so you might have 10% is crucial for whatever reason, needs to be stored in your own data center. The other 90% is allowed to go into the cloud. So that's a hybrid cloud model you would use then to keep some internally and some in the cloud, but also it's a transitory model of moving from a 100% data center model at the moment to a 100% cloud model in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so we talked about the different types of migration and possibly the different architecture of the platform that we could look at from a migration perspective. So let's talk about some of the other considerations that one needs to keep in mind or make when we are thinking about setting solutions in the cloud. Mark, you have any thoughts that you want to share?
Certainly, I think Karthik talked a little bit earlier about some of the models for moving to the cloud. You have the lift and shift model, refactoring and re-architecting, and you can use, if you're just doing the lift and shift, the Kubernetes or Docker capabilities, where you are building an application that you have on site up into the cloud using those capabilities. So that's an easy model, and but if you really want to use the cloud, if you really want to get the benefits and the utilize the scalability, utilize the functionalities around AI, utilize functionality around API gateways, that's when you have to start really thinking about re-architecting. And when you re-architect your solutions, you then break in those maybe monolithic applications down into smaller capabilities. And then you can look at utilizing the capabilities that whatever cloud provider gives you to have items such as serverless computing. I'll just describe that for maybe people who've never come across serverless computing. First of all, there is always a server. There's no such thing as serverless in the sense that you may understand it from the words. What happens with serverless computing, you create your software, your solution, and then you put that into the cloud, and you ask the cloud, when that software is used, to provision a server for that point in time. And this is the way tools such as Alexa and other capabilities work, to actually provision that server in the background when the capability is used. And that's a very efficient model to reduce your costs and storage capabilities that you have associated with transactions. And the other area then to look at is security and compliance. When you move to the cloud, you are moving away from that model of having a physical wall, a physical connectivity to your own data center. You were traversing the internet to get to a cloud data center. So you really need to start thinking that when you move to the cloud, how do you build security from the outset? How do you work on a least privileges model so that you're only opening up the access gateways for the people who need it? How do you look at compliance? Again, depending on what part you are in the world, you will have rules and regulations about maybe data being onshore, maybe specific data like HIPAA rules in America, personal identifiable information rules all around the world. So again, looking at each of the cloud suppliers about how they implement those, how they give you that compliance is a really important part of that re-architecting your solutions to the cloud.
Thanks for that, Mark. I'm sure security is the first thing that comes to everybody's mind in the audience today. I'm wondering, Karthik, if I pose the same question to you, is there anything else that you believe you would like to add in terms of considerations?
Yes, Geoffrey, of course. So two of the other areas that I think are important are, number one, disaster recovery. So disaster recovery usually comes as an afterthought for some organizations, which is not a good idea. Especially it's assumed that a cloud provider provides disaster recovery automatically. That's not the case, right? So most cloud services have option to configure your application across multiple availability zones. So that means you use the building blocks of the cloud provider to design and configure disaster recovery for your application. That's an important point. So that means it has to be factored into your architecture and planned for. So that's an important point. So the other point is cost optimization, and which opens up into a very interesting topic called FinOps. So FinOps, as some of you would have known, is a term for financial operations to control, monitor, and optimize the consumption costs of your cloud. So there are ways in which you can use those building blocks in an efficient way. And you can configure some intelligent monitoring to find out, okay, fine, my virtual machine is getting lower traffic than I planned. So maybe I should dynamically reduce the kind of infrastructure size to a kind of a small instance, and automatically scale it up to a large instance only when I get the traffic, right? So this kind of intelligence to kind of use just-in-time infrastructure building blocks, completely keeping your cost utilization in mind, is a whole new domain altogether, right? And this is something which we specialize in. We have built a tool called Sentinel that exactly does that. And this is a very important aspect when it comes to migration into cloud, because if you take costs for granted, you may end up paying a lot for the utilization that you are incurring.
Very valid points. Now, so far we've talked a lot about applications and architecture, but the whole journey of migration stays incomplete without talking about data. So I'll come to you first, Karthik, in terms of when it comes to data, are there any specific ways that you would like to kind of describe when you talk about moving data into the cloud or populating solutions that you've built in the cloud to ensure that there is, data lineage is maintained, there is consistency? And
there are multiple ways. So I think one of the ways that I would like to talk about is streaming data. So this has to be seen as a classic data integration solution, where you configure a pipeline between your infrastructure and the actual cloud when you do the migration. So you make sure that the data is streamed to the cloud, and you design the solution in such a way that over a period of time, you are able to kind of complete the migration while the data gets streamed. So that's one of the ways. So many other ways which Mark would explain.
Certainly picking up from that approach that Karthik mentioned, the data streaming, and that would be, I would have said, the most traditional method that a lot of companies would use is to stream that data across into the cloud provider. But I'm reasonably old, I would say. I come from an older age where quite often when we did upgrades or data center moves and other things, you picked a 4-day weekend. Easter was always a great time, or Christmas, unfortunately, as well, was a great time to actually do a data center move. Because over Easter, there was the ability in the olden days, when I first started doing this sort of role, to actually switch your servers off, switch your capability off, switch your solutions off to your customers, and you had 4 days to lift and shift your data and all of your solutions over to another data center. Now the world isn't like that. A company can't switch off for 4 days. So the model that Karthik was talking about is an excellent model to get into the cloud. But there may be occasions where streaming data, the bandwidth, the amount of data you have in your data center is so huge. If you've been a financial services organization running for 50, 60, 100 years, you have all of that data in your data storage centers. It's a vast thing to stream over to the cloud. So if I can talk maybe about a couple of technologies that Amazon use, that I've seen used, and there's one called Snowball Edge. Snowball Edge is a, for want of a better term, a NAS box, a network attached storage. It's a big cube, physical cube that comes, you order from Amazon, it comes to your data center, you plug it in to your data center, and you can stream data over onto that physical cube. You can then get that shipped back by a renowned shipping company back to an Amazon, your local Amazon data center, where they will plug it in to the data center, and then through controls that you and they have, you can stream the data off that onto the cloud that you've built up for them. But even that, there's a large amount of storage, but for some organizations, that's still not the level of data they need. And if you are an extreme case where you have a whole data center and you are trying to do the weekend type of move that I used to do in the past, Amazon, and I'm sure Google and Microsoft and Oracle and other service providers have similar capability. But in the Amazon case, there's something called the Snowmobile. And this is a HGV, a long loader, which has servers, it has storage capability. The storage capability, the last time I looked at this, was around about 100 petabytes. So you can think of the amount of storage that has. So that will, again, pull up to your data center, you get a huge LAN cable, or something a bit better than that these days. You plug that in to the Snowmobile and you stream your data high speed from your data center into the Snowmobile storage. You then Snowmobile that to your closest Amazon data center, and then again that is pulled off onto the cloud capability you've created. Obviously, doing things like this are not easy. It takes a vast amount of planning, and some of the models here are mixed. So the model I was just talking about with the Snowmobile, what you might do there is that takes your data, which is from end of play on a Friday, that loads into the data center with Amazon on the Saturday, and then using the method that Karthik talked about data streaming, you then update and repopulate that data from the most recent data which has been achieved since you did the bulk offload. So I think there's many ways to move data, but it is difficult. It is a conscious effort. It's something that takes a lot of planning. If any of you in the past have had to do any form of migration, even upgrading an application, your data move, the dry runs, the dress rehearsals, the move to stop customer disruption is an extremely important part of the whole data migration process itself.
Okay, thanks, Karthik. Pretty interesting ideas there. So let's talk a little bit about some of the risks that are associated with migration. We've talked about what to move, how to move, and where to move. But then that cannot be complete without the risks. And we can then go on to talk about how some of the organizations can actually mitigate them. Mark, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about some of the risks that you foresee?
It's one of the ones where when I'm dealing with CIOs, CTOs, and the leaders of businesses, when we talk about moving to the cloud, there's a lot of concerns even to this day that are expressed about the move to the cloud, because up until that point, these senior stakeholders have had control. They've had that security of knowing where their data is. They have that physical building, that physical infrastructure that they can go, feel, and touch, which you don't have in the cloud world. So you have to go through the concerns, the risks, the issues, and manage those. So areas that we look at when we are talking to senior stakeholders is data security and privacy, ensuring that the provider you choose, the scenario you choose, the way you're going to store the data covers the regulations, making sure that you work within your sector, your industry regulations, and maybe the wider regulations from your government, or in my case, for a long while, covering the European Union regulations. On top of that, we build into the compliance area, looking at making sure all of your solutions are compliant to, again, in America, you have HIPAA, PII, in the UK and European region, you have the ISO standards. So again, when you are talking to your providers of cloud services, making sure that they conform themselves to these standards, and that the services and capabilities that you are using and how you are building your solutions then can conform to those standards. Another area that Karthik was talking about earlier was the disaster recovery. You have to look at, you move into the cloud, how would you prevent the horrendous situation of a cloud building being knocked out? Again, I can go back into my history of when I used to work on mainframes. We had two mainframes separated by 0.5 kilometer, which were one was then the disaster recovery for the other, and vice versa. So you need to look at the disaster recovery aspect in detail. And there are many ways. You have the replication of data, you have the replication of databases and how that is stored in your region or around the world. And looking at capabilities such as Pilot Light, where you keep a very small instance of your solutions, your website, your CRMs running in a sort of a 5% capability on a server in a different part of the world, a different data center, compared to your 95% that is running in your main. So that way, should that main data center have a serious outage, you can very quickly, using scalability of the cloud, move from that Pilot Light, and hence the term of Pilot Light, it can light the fire and build out your cloud capability. Two other areas I'd like to quickly touch on in this before I hand over to Karthik to give some of his views are cost overruns. Moving to the cloud is a program of work. And for most companies, it's a considerable amount. It's a transformation. It's something that you should consider seriously and you should make a plan for. You need to start thinking about building a center of excellence team before you move to the cloud. You may need to bring in custom suppliers such as ourselves at Tory Harris, who have experience of running and managing and delivering a cloud transformation. So you'll need for a short while probably to expand your staff and supplement your staff with experts in the field while they build up their knowledge and while you train them in the cloud capabilities. And the final aspect I'd like to talk about is vendor lock-in. When you're moving maybe from your own data center, you've got lots of technology, lots of tools, quite a lot of questions are, well, am I selling my soul to Amazon or Google or Microsoft or Oracle? Well, what you can do then is look at a multi-cloud strategy. Do you split some of your capabilities in Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Oracle and other providers? Do you bridge the gap? What capabilities you have? See, the cost model then changes. Sometimes it can be better to lock to one vendor because you get a better cost price, but it's a consideration that always needs to be communicated to the CIO, the CTO around how that model and how the choice of your vendors will impact you in the longer term. So I'll stop on the areas that I see there. And Karthik, if I hand over maybe for you to give your views.
I think the other areas, just to continue from where Mark left, is choosing the right cloud provider is a key aspect because usually there will be a huge checklist of security, compliance, certifications, reliability, right? So it's very important to make sure that all the boxes are ticked so that you are in compliance with respect to your business requirements, your compliance requirements, and it aligns with the cloud providers' certifications and completeness. Right? The other point is the actual planning of migration. So it's very important to look at this, like how you typically plan any application migration for that matter. So you need to think in terms of application migration, data migration. How do you have a rollback strategy in place? What happens when you need to have two separate groups? Like there are multiple strategies like blue-green strategy. So that way you are able to quickly mitigate any challenges that you may face, which also includes a lot of dry runs, as Mark mentioned. So that's something which needs to be looked upon. The third aspect is using cloud-specific security tools and best practices. Of course, it's a given that cloud service provider by themselves provide a lot of security capabilities, and the perimeter of the cloud is secure. But it's very important to look at security beyond the perimeter and look at your application architecture. Right? So you don't want to leave any open link, open loophole in your application, and to make sure that you use the capabilities and building blocks of the cloud provider by configuring it correctly and not use any of the misconfigurations or avoiding any best practice to kind of lock down your entire boundaries of your application. Then the third part is monitoring. Like you have a monitoring infrastructure for your applications within your data center. There are equivalent building blocks that the cloud service provider themselves offer that allows you to monitor the cloud blocks themselves. It also allows you to monitor what's inside that block. So that way, you know that if maybe a bug in your application is burning so much of CPU, of course, it means that you're going to unnecessarily pay the bill just because you have a bug in your application or an issue with the migration that's consuming a lot of cloud resources that it shouldn't be consuming. So having a monitoring solution in place will help you identify these issues as quickly as possible so that you can mitigate them. And last but not the least, having a disaster recovery plan and making sure that plan works, right? And as I mentioned before, it's important to plan for disaster recovery in your topology and test it to make sure that you run dry runs and simulate that the traffic seamlessly flows from one disaster endpoint to other working endpoint to make sure that your customer impact is not there. So thank you.
Thanks, Karthik. There are some very valuable tips for mitigating some of the risks that that Mark was talking about earlier. Thank you for that. Okay, so before we head to a close, I'll come back to either of you to kind of see if you have any other thoughts to add, and before we go into questions.
Yeah, I think one of the things I find about the cloud is it's a way to experiment. It's a way to trial things. If we look at what the cloud has enabled over the years, there are companies such as Uber and Just Eat, which probably wouldn't have been created by the cloud being in existence. The fact that they could start up on a limited budget and then expand, where the idea may not have worked. I think a lot of companies can use the cloud as that innovation tool. They can go on there, they can start if they have the development teams, if they have an innovation center, they can start using the capabilities of the cloud without having to buy servers and software licenses. I could go on now and I could start up a server, I could put some software in there, do some experimentation, and then if it didn't work, crash it out, and that's cost me a couple of hours worth of server cost to do that. And I know I started working in the cloud several years ago now, and if anybody has gone onto the cloud, you go on the console of whatever provider you're using, and the console would list the capabilities within the cloud, and you might go on and create a server, create some storage, create a VPC or whatever you wanted to do on there. But now, every week there seems to be, every time I log on to the cloud console of the provider I tend to use, there seems to be new capability. We see the move now into machine learning, deep learning, large language models, the big data capabilities all coming in. And these are developing week by week, month by month. And it just means as a company, you can go in, you can try those capabilities, you can utilize the power of the cloud without making the big commitment to buy in a £500,000 server rack and the storage to go with it, without committing to spend £1 million on a solution provider's software licenses. And if you are a provider of services to the customers, we can see that ability now to move to SaaS-based models, software as a service model, which is driving a lot of revenue. You look at companies such as Salesforce, who have been in the cloud from the very beginning of the sort of company starting. That software as a service model is becoming much more prevalent, that you can sell services to customers. And if you have one customer, great, you put that into the cloud. But you have that replicable model to allow you to take that first iteration of the software, the solution you're selling, and then duplicate it for your second customer, your third customer. So that model to build out and again scale as you as a company becomes more successful becomes increasingly important. So some of my further thoughts, Joffy, on the topic of the cloud.
Thank you very much, Mark. Karthik, anything that you would like to add as final thoughts?
So what I would like to add is, as Mark said, without cloud, some of the business models would not have been possible at all. And today, cloud has reduced the barrier of entry for most applications. And one point I would like to add specifically for enterprises that's looking at migrating to cloud, it's important to remember that one of the aspects when you have multiple applications within cloud, within your data center, integration becomes a key aspect. And today, it's very interesting to see that even integration has moved to cloud. You have platforms like iPaaS, integration platform as a service, that's best suited for cloud to cloud integration, right? So when you want to plan your migration, it's important to also keep integration in mind and factor that in your migration strategy. So that's all I would like to mention at this point of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark and Karthik, for your insights. I'll take some of the questions that we are getting on the chat. I'll probably do the same. I'll direct one to each of you, and maybe we can go through that. The first question I have is, why do some customers still strongly want to be on-prem? Mark, do you want to take this?
I think a lot of it is people are scared still. People see this thing called the cloud. What is it? It's a nebulous thing. It's not physical. I know there are providers now who will allow you to go to a data center to view it, so you become more confident of that capability. And it's for people like myself, Karthik, to go and talk through where we've done this, where we see companies of scale, companies of trust who have done that journey into the cloud. It's showing an example in the move to the cloud that it can be successful. But there's a nervous thing, you have to think it through. And for some companies, it isn't the right move. There can be situations where they have the investment, they are committed to long-term contracts, maybe for buildings, for software solutions, that now isn't the right time. But I think longer term, if you want to expand, if you want to take advantage of a lot of the new capabilities, the cloud will be the way forwards. So I think I can understand the nervousness, but it's a path that I think a lot of companies will need to go down to in the future to allow themselves further success.
Just to add to that, I still remember an interesting conversation we had in one of the conferences where one enterprise customer who initially had doubts about the kind of compliance and security of the cloud, apparently the cloud provider offered a tour of the cloud data center and walked them through all the practices and controls. And the customer was surprised and admitted that the cloud data center is more secure than their own. And that kind of created the kind of trust. So it's the trust game, right? So today customers are kind of seeing, and a lot of them are moving to the cloud. So it's just a matter of time.
Second question I have is, if a customer wants to do AI-based visual analytics and wants to do it on-prem, do you think they will hit a computing roadblock before they know it? Karthik, maybe I'll come to you first.
Yes, I'll take it. So I can share an experience we had when we did one of our generative AI projects. So usually any generative AI is computation heavy. And you know that the graphics processing unit that you will typically find in a consumer gaming desktop has now moved to the cloud because you need to run these computations in parallel to implement these generative AI use cases, right? There's a very interesting video published by NVIDIA that actually shows you how the hardware architecture of ChatGPT works. So it's completely GPU driven, and it's very expensive for enterprises to kind of provision a GPU cluster, both in terms of the cost, in terms of energy, in terms of sustainability. It's just not going to work. So that way the cloud provides the required abstraction and scale when it comes to implementing these use cases. And one of the other interesting point is usually the hardware for generative AI, or specifically AI in matter, you have this hardware concept called the tensor processing unit. So it implements hardware acceleration for neural networks. So most modern GPUs have this tensor processing unit built into it as integrated chips, and cloud service provider offers these tensor processing units within the clouds. So it also gives that level of what do you say, like that infrastructure protection against infrastructure obsolescence, because this domain in the hardware is growing rapidly. We all saw how quickly Apple innovated from M1 to M2. So you don't want to provision a data center with, let's say, a kind of a GPU model 1, and 6 months down the line, you suddenly realize that you need to upgrade to GPU model 2. Whereas if you go with a cloud provider, you kind of get that abstraction for free.
I'd fully back Karthik up there. I think that scale, that ability to change, to rapidly evolve, to move forwards is what the cloud gives you. And I think that is a perfect example that Karthik just gave about the capabilities of chips and how fast. Moore's law is still in effect. Every year we see new NVIDIA GPUs, new AMD CPUs, new Intel processors, CUDA cores, Tensor cores. All of these capabilities are rapidly developing, and by the time you've ordered and got enough storage to put on site, installed it, got it up and running, quite often that next series of capabilities is available to you. And if you use the cloud, you don't have to deal with that worry that you are buying a generation behind before you actually got it up and running.
So the next question, yeah, I can take this question. This is a question which says, have Tori Harris successfully influenced the customer to move to cloud? Definitely, yes. I mean, we've been cloud integration, migration to cloud has been a core part of our offering, and we've been working with customers over many years to migrate their entire estate, to kind of drive adoption to cloud, to look at applications that are not cloud native, to transform them. So there are a lot of microservices that we've built in a cloud native manner to move applications onto cloud. We've also done data acceleration programs to help customers migrate their data, help the data integration in this process. So, and then Karthik, I don't know, you want to talk about our legacy to cloud native kit in this
Yes.
context?
So we have a migration accelerator called the Legacy to Cloud Native Kit. So that includes a set of processes and set of accelerator tools that automate some of the repeatable steps that are common in many migration projects. It also has a set of building blocks to set up your cloud native environment, to quickly provision a microservice-based development environment. It has a set of migration tools to move your configuration from one API platform to the other. And we have a set of tools that accelerates your DevOps, because the moment you talk about cloud native, your development lifecycle process is also important, that needs to be accelerated and streamlined. So we have tools that enhances the CI/CD capabilities. And we have a suite of frameworks that enhances and speeds up the migration. So there are tools like Tecton, Sentinel, AutoStub, Automaton, that pretty much fits in every single lifecycle stage of your migration.
Then we have a question that that talks about, is cloud only for the large enterprises? I mean, is there a limitation to small or medium organizations? Can they also leverage the benefit of cloud?
I don't think there's any reason why any size organization can't move to the cloud. And I think for smaller scale organizations, it's one of the most sensible moves. And the reason I say that is because if you succeed, you need to grow rapidly. And you don't want to be in a position where you are waiting, as I mentioned very early on in this webinar, 9 months to procure a new server. In the cloud, you can scale quickly. If you have a product, or even just you have a weekend where you want to do a Black Friday type sale, as a small organization, if you're only running on a small computer, if you put the sale on, you might not be able to satisfy the demand that sale is having for your customers. With the capabilities of the cloud, you can scale up just for that weekend. You can increase the capacity for your website, for your CRM, for your shop, for your databases, just for a weekend while you have that sale on, and then scale back down again. So the financial model, the ability to expand and then contract, is a big driver, I think, for a lot of small organizations. And in the best world, you just keep expanding, and the cloud allows you to that growth model without constricting you in any way. And we see that from examples all around the world.
Add to that, I've seen one startup company using Google Cloud Platform. I'll take a very specific example here. So one good thing about Google is it provides a serverless with very generous quota for different services. So it's literally the startup was able to launch their application without incurring any cost whatsoever until that quota reaches, right? And you have a very generous quota, let's say 1 million requests up to that limit is free. And 4 hours of CPU time is free, for example, right? So if you're starting out, and if you know that your traffic patterns are slowly going to increase over time, you may be able to kind of run this literally for free, right? So it's definitely a good option for startups and small providers.
I have one other question that's come up. Is there a pre-built calculator that we can use to calculate on-prem capex versus cloud opex under any of the as a service models, whether it's infrastructure as a service, PaaS, and so on and so forth?
Yes. Oh, sorry, please, Karthik, you go first.
Sure. So yes, we definitely have this. This is part of our legacy to cloud migration toolkit. It's part of the framework. So it has 2 parts. One is we have a framework that allows you to calculate what's your existing cost of operations of your on-prem applications. And mapping it to a cloud service provider, it's an activity that needs to be done. So we also have a decision tree in terms of how do you map an on-prem solution to a cloud provider. And the cloud providers themselves offer a cost calculator online, right? That all of us have seen that. So you use a combination of these three to be able to kind of create a business case or show that, okay, fine, this is what I'm running now and this is how I'll save cost. So this is the efficiency I'll gain. So anything you want to add, Mark?
Yeah, I was just going to, there's obviously those statements you made, Kathy, but I think one of the things for me is when you look at the cloud, I mentioned earlier, you need to build a program or project of work to do that move. And one of the key resources that you need, which I think is missed in a lot of projects and programs, even your standard work, is a capacity planner. You need to understand the throughput you have on your servers now. You need to understand the data storage that you utilize in. All of those are very important factors because the tools that you mentioned, Karthik, are great, but you have to have the data to feed those tools. So I would say to any company that's looking to move to the cloud, ensure that you get a high quality capacity planner resource in your program team to make sure you understand from the outside of the program what that amount of data, because it's very easy to underestimate what you are going to move to the cloud and the interactions that the cloud then is going to cost you for.
Smart for that. Obviously, cloud migration can be a really daunting and complex undertaking. But with everything that we discussed, it's important to remember that it can also bring significant benefits to the organization. So as long as we are planning and executing the migration by taking the necessary steps, mitigating the risks, and ensuring that you're building for the future, you can increase your chances to success. Thank you so much for joining us today. And stay tuned. Later in the month, later in November, we have part 3 of the 3-part webinar, which is largely focusing on cloud innovation. So we look forward to having you there. Stay tuned for the invite coming your way for that.